Right, so it is no surprise whatsoever that Labour have won their vote on the winter fuel allowance cut to pensioners today. They were always going to. The overwhelming size of their parliamentary majority and the fact Starmer filled his ranks with yes men guaranteed that. But any talk of a large rebellion, as so many MPs moaned about this policy, amounted to, well, pretty much nothing at all. What Starmer and Reeves have done here is once again take the very easy choice, the very easy route, by punching down on those less fortunate rather than tax wealth. Do something that will raise, compared to the size of their dubiously claimed financial black hole, virtually nothing in terms of money. Attack a demographic that is considered the Conservative Party voter base. Attack a demographic that doesn't tend to vote Labour, thinking they can get away with it, much as the Tories got away with the tax to benefit claimants who can forget their penny pinching when they uprated universal credit during the pandemic, for example, but refused to do likewise and went to court to stop them being forced to do the same for those still on the old benefit system. In exactly the same vein as the Tories should be held to account for the vicious cuts and choices they made to avoid taxing the rich, Labour are making their own choices to avoid taxing the rich, and the same falling standards and lethality of that is being laid bare again. There's no difference between either of these parties anymore, when instead of protecting the people, they sacrifice them at the altar of capitalism. Right, so Labour have won their vote on cutting the winter fuel allowance for 10 million pensioners. It's not like Keir Starmer was ever going to lose it, unfortunately, really, not when yet again he abuses the use of that party whip, imposing another draconian three-line whip on his own party, his own MPs, to vote this measure through, condemning many of their oldest constituents to misery and for many death, as Labour's own research suggests some 4,000 excess deaths will result from this measure. All of this was known way back in 2017 when they were opposed to the Tories trying to do this, when such research was commissioned under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, during which time Keir Starmer was of course in his cabinet. So it's not like he doesn't know about it either. But just like any true blue Tory, he simply doesn't care. Once upon a time, the party whip was a device to simply ensure that MPs conducted themselves with honesty and integrity. Now it is used as a stick to beat MPs into submission and not represent their constituents anymore. Country before party, Keir Starmer said during the general election campaign, except when he whips his MPs to do otherwise. Now it is used to make sure his MPs vote to keep kids in poverty. And now, here, today, to ensure that thousands of pensioners are left without the means to heat their homes anymore. Of all the currently sitting Labour MPs, not including those already suspended from the party over that child poverty benefit cut after that vote, just one Labour MP today chose to vote against their own party. Just one Labour MP actually rebelled, because abstention is not doing what is right and just. It is just taking the coward's way out over something that should never have taken a second thought to reject. However, this is what 53 Labour MPs chose to do. Due to their cowardice, although some may have been paired, it has to be said, Labour won the vote by a margin of 348 to 228. The one currently sitting Labour MP who did the right thing, did the decent thing, was John Trickett. He issued a statement afterwards saying, "I have voted against the government's proposal to remove the winter fuel payment. The winter fuel payment was a great Labour achievement. When it was introduced by Gordon Brown in 1997, I was proud to vote for it. That Labour government had a transformative impact on pensioner poverty, which fell from 28% to 13% during our time in office. It shames our country that pensioner poverty has now risen to 18% after 14 years of Conservative rule. This winter will be extremely difficult for my constituents of all ages. After years of obscene profiteering by energy companies, they are hiking bills once again. I fear that removing the payment from pensioners will mean that many more will fall into poverty this winter. We know that the consequences of pensioner poverty are devastating. It can even be a matter of life and death. I have worked behind the scenes to try and change the government's position, but to no avail. Our country is richer than it's ever been, but the wealth is not shared fairly. In my view, the government should be looking to raise revenues from the wealthiest in society, not working class pensioners. I could not, in good conscience, vote to make my constituents poorer. I will sleep well tonight, knowing that I voted to defend my constituents." Solidarity to John Trickett for showing the courage of his conviction and for being the only Labour MP, barring of course any who were paired for this vote, who put their constituents before their party. Of the 7 MPs who were suspended for backing the scrapping of the 2-child benefit cap, 5 of them also stood by the constituents this time around. John McDonnell, Ipsana Begum, Richard Bergen, Zara Sultana and Ian Byrne, thus looking increasingly more unlikely that they will be readmitted to the Labour Party anytime soon, if at all. I dare say Trickett might expect to be joining them now, soon, if Starmer's past track record counts for anything. At time of writing, though, he is still a Labour MP. This vote has just stripped some 10 million pensioners of the winter fuel allowance. The top-up payment Labour itself introduced, that Gordon Brown introduced, as John Trickett said, to ensure those in our society most vulnerable to the cold had enough money to heat their homes. Now Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves, who ought to be known collectively these days as Kid Starmer and Rachel Thieves, for the sake of dropping a pittance into Reeves's fiscal black hole, some £1.5 billion raised to fill that £22 billion alleged gap in public spending that she's declared. And I say alleged because the requirement to fill it is arguable, and we're cutting our way to growth, as Starmer and Reeves keep bleating about, is what the Tories have been trying and failing to do for years, and yet here they go again with it, doing the same thing themselves. Sure, Labour say the economy will collapse if it isn't cut, but if that is all the saving is, £1.5 billion, she's either thick, stupid, or both. Our national expenditure is about £1 trillion a year, 1,000 billion. So come off it. You'd have to be soft in the head to buy this line that this amount of money is the difference between the economy surviving or collapsing. So all the talk of economic calamity, of having no choice, of blaming the Tories for this, well, none of it, not one bit of it, is actually true. It's all a lie, and it's now being voted through regardless, and every Labour MP who voted it through did so putting their own interests first, rather than doing what was right and just and fair, and every last one of them who voted for this deserves to lose their seat for it. It should never be forgiven or forgotten. And actually, I'm not surprised so many of them did as instructed, as last night there was apparently a private members' meeting where MPs could air their grievances freely about this, and according to one attendee, not one single member of the Parliamentary Labour Party in attendance spoke up with concerns. Not one single Labour MP. Doesn't that just go to show how successful Keir Starmer has been of gutting the party of anyone worth voting for? 4,000 more pensioners will statistically die this winter as a result of this move, on top of the 8,000 that will already die each winter because they live in cold homes. Disproportionately, this attack will hit over 75s more, since of working pensioners, most are between pension age and 75. Most will be people living in the north, and because women tend to live longer, more of them will be affected by this than men. Therefore, this is an ageist, misogynistic and disproportionate attack on the north as well. As a whole, though, it is the single biggest attack on pensioners in a generation. It functionally puts such unpopular moves like Theresa May's dementia tax plan in the shade because of the harm this will do and the sheer needlessness of it. Bear in mind, this was not even in the Labour Party manifesto either. There is not one single person in the country who should feel guilty for voting Labour, not knowing this was on the card, not knowing this was coming, when nobody knew this was something Rachel Reeves was planning. There may yet be hope, though, as a result of this underhanded scheming, however, once it hits the House of Lords. It wasn't in the manifesto, and let's just say there's plans afoot there. But Rachel Reeves has her £22 billion black hole. Still, the line Labour stick to is they didn't know about it. Well, the OBR said it was there. The IFS have said it is impossible for Labour to have not known about it. But for as long as Rachel Reeves insists that the public finances are like a household budget, when she knows damn well it isn't, someone will have to pay for it. That someone will always be working class, and Labour have decided it'll be working class pensioners. Presumably, it's because they vote Tory, or are widely thought of as a demographic, the pensioners as a whole, that they vote Tory. But that isn't the point at all. When as an elected representative, you're meant to represent the interests of all of your constituents, whether they voted for you or not. Labour have already gone after kids. They can't vote at all, of course. So it all very much smacks of not who do we have to hit with cuts, but who do we choose to hit with cuts that's going to benefit us, the Labour Party, the most. It's not a case of looking at who hasn't paid up or who is to blame for the black hole she claims we have. That requires cuts to fill, which is also nonsense. She could choose to spend to invest to help get it paid down. The debt is owed to the government itself. After all, they do own the Bank of England, for heaven's sake, so they can make other choices here. Fundamentally, the one choice they've chosen not to make is the same one the Tories chose not to make, and that is to tax wealth. The excuse to not do this now, to free up the government's ability to spend, is now basically inexcusable. and would be a very popular move across the board, except naturally for the rich and their media mouthpieces and the Tories. Instead of that, though, Keir Starmer has said he's prepared to be unpopular to do what is necessary, despite it very much not being necessary. If that were true, and people believed it, you wouldn't be unpopular for doing it, would you? So this again is his choice. And on the matter of that choice, why is it that these so-called tough decisions and unpopular decisions are always against those with the least? The truth is, I say I'm so angry I can't even get my words out. The truth is, these are the easy decisions. The tough decisions will be going after the rich, who are also too often their party donors as well. Until we stop electing politicians who are up for sale to the highest bidder, that is something that unfortunately won't change. Where the Tories got away with their shirkers and skivers mantras to attack benefit claimants, there's no populist narrative that will protect Starmer and Reeves from public outcry when they go after the oldest in society. There will still be those defending this choice of Starmer and Reeves, though, saying there are rich pensioners who don't need it. And that is true, they don't. There are rich pensioners like that. But if you means test the winter fuel allowance, you then introduce massive administration costs to make sure only those you deem deserving of it get it. How about you make the winter fuel allowance taxable instead? Those that don't need it will then get taxed on it, and some would be recouped without introducing massive additional spending costs. I think that's a much smarter idea myself. Pensioners are getting a big fat pension increase, Starmer has said too, but that won't take effect until next April. The hardship of winter is coming before that. Pensioners should claim pension credit as another excuse, except they too often get turned down for it. It's also a barbarically complicated system and doesn't encouraging people to claim a benefit just then negate the savings you say are needed to be made by cutting the winter fuel allowance to begin with. On top of all of that, we've just seen Starmer break his promise on energy price increases too. He's waving through a 10% energy price increase at the same time he does all of this, all as winter is coming. He couldn't be more abjectly, painfully, politically inept and downright cruel if he tried. It adds another factor to this as well. If they are coining it in at the rate of $1 billion in profit a week, these energy companies, why are pensioners paying a price here and not them? That's another source of revenue you could tap, isn't it? Massive tax breaks to the point they pay next to sod all, and the excuse is always made by government that Ofgem have said they are only making small profits, when we know the big money is made in energy generation and distribution, which Ofgem has no remit over. They only have a remit over the supply end of our energy market, a convenient excuse for politicians to hide behind to not go after the oil and gas giants. This is a sickening display of how badly this Labour government are going to fail this country and the people in it. And they will fail to get the growth they want by copying the Tories. They won't go after the rich. They won't go after the corporations paying low tax rates too. We've got 5 years of this, guys. And we're already sick to the back teeth of Starmer after just 8 weeks. Expect these sycophantic Labour MPs who voted this through to carry on voting as they are dictated to and fail us, their constituents. We can but hope for some kind of mutiny against this ongoing nastiness. Pressure put on our MPs is one way for doing that. But when only one Labour MP can raise their head above the parapet, there's something like this. When there's some 400 of them, it doesn't look very good for any of us, does it? Labour MPs have not liked what they've been reading in their inboxes. So keeping up the pressure on them, especially as they claim expenses for their own heating this year, is the least they deserve. Don't ever forget what has happened here today, though, and look after your elderly neighbours this year if you can. They're going to need you this year more than ever, because the government's not there for them. Keir Starmer's administration is going to be one that promises nothing but misery, and on that he will succeed in delivering. But what he won't deliver are economic results. Until more cash is put in ordinary working class people's pockets and not lining the wallets of people already so obscenely rich they couldn't spend it all in a dozen lifetimes, the economy won't grow. Check out this video recommendation for more on what Starmer has sadly in store for us as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.